September 5th, 1976, 11:47 p.m., the Las Vegas Hilton. Frank Sinatra stood in Ed McMahon's dressing room on the third floor, his hand on Dean Martin's shoulder. Dean was sweating, not from the heat, from fear. "I can't do this, Frank." "Yes, you can. It's been 20 years. 20 years, Frank. He doesn't want to see me. Hell, I don't even know if I want to see him." Frank looked his best friend in the eye. "You're going out there, and when you do, you're going to remember why you loved him in the first place." Dean shook his head, reached for the bourbon on the table. Frank moved it away. "Not tonight, Pally. Tonight you do this sober." Downstairs in the main showroom, Jerry Lewis stood on stage in front of 5,000 people. He was 6 hours into his annual Labor Day telethon for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Tired, emotional, running on adrenaline and coffee. He had no idea what was about to happen. No idea that his best friend, the man he hadn't spoken to in 20 years, the man whose absence had left a hole in his chest that never healed, that man was in the building. And Frank Sinatra, the master orchestrator, the manipulator who could make presidents and mob bosses dance to his tune, was about to pull off the reunion of the century. The reunion that would make both men cry on national television. The reunion that proved some friendships are stronger than pride. The breakup that broke two hearts. To understand why this moment mattered, you need to understand what these men lost. July 25th, 1956. The Copacabana Club, New York City. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis performed their last show together. Exactly 10 years to the day since their first performance at the 500 Club in Atlantic City. 10 years of sold-out nightclubs, 16 movies, millions of dollars. A partnership that had made them the biggest comedy team in America. And it ended with two men who could barely look at each other. The final performance was professional, perfect even. Dean sang, Jerry did slapstick. They hit every mark, every joke, every note. The audience roared. They had no idea what they were watching. A funeral disguised as a show. After the curtain fell, Jerry Lewis walked across the hallway to Dean's dressing room. He wanted ice, that's what he told himself, just ice for a drink before tomorrow's show. But there was no tomorrow's show. Dean opened the door, looked at Jerry. 20 years of performing together, 20 years of brotherhood. And Dean's face was empty. "Good show tonight, kid." "Yeah," Jerry said. "Good show." They stared at each other. Everything that needed to be said hung in the air, unspoken. "See you around, Dean." "See you around." Jerry walked away, got to the elevator, pressed the button. And when those doors closed, Jerry Lewis broke down completely. "I was losing my best friend," Jerry would write decades later, "and I didn't know why." But he did know why. They both knew why. The slow poison of success. The problems started small. The set of Living It Up, their 12th film together. Look magazine wanted to do a cover story, a big spread, national publicity, the kind of exposure money couldn't buy. The photographer set up the shot, Dean and Jerry, side by side, the way they'd stood for 8 years. When the magazine hit newsstands, Jerry was on the cover. Dean had been cropped out completely. Jerry saw it first, called Dean immediately. "I didn't know, Pally. I swear to God, I didn't know they were going to do that." "It's fine, kid. Don't worry about it." But it wasn't fine. Because it was never about one magazine cover. It was about a pattern that had been building since their first film together. Critics loved Jerry. They called him a comic genius, the next Charlie Chaplin, a talent that came along once in a generation. Dean? Dean was adequate, serviceable, a good straight man. Never mind that Dean Martin was the one who made Jerry funny. Never mind that Dean's timing was so perfect, so precise, that he could set up a joke with nothing but a raised eyebrow. The critics didn't see it. The public didn't see it. And slowly, painfully, that perception poisoned everything. By 1956, on the set of Living It Up, their final film together, the tension was unbearable. They didn't speak between takes, didn't eat together, didn't joke around the way they used to. Director Frank Tashlin became a referee instead of a filmmaker. And one day, in a moment of anger, Dean Martin said the words that ended everything. "You're nothing to me but a fucking $sign." Jerry didn't respond, didn't argue, just walked off the set. Because the truth was worse than the insult. The truth was that Dean was right.
So they did what frightened men do. They ended it. 20 years of silence. After the breakup, Dean Martin became a superstar. He joined the Rat Pack, made hit records, headlined in Vegas, hosted his own television variety show that ran for 9 years. Everything he touched turned to gold. But ask anyone who knew him during those years, and they tell you the same thing. Dean was never quite the same after Jerry. Jerry Lewis became a superstar too. He directed films, created characters that became iconic, built a charity empire around the Muscular Dystrophy Association. He achieved everything he'd ever dreamed of, except one thing, his best friend. The two men existed in separate universes, same industry, same city sometimes, but they never spoke, never reached out, never tried to mend what was broken. Pride is funny that way. It convinces you that silence is strength, that walking away is winning, that you don't need the person whose absence is killing you. By 1976, Dean Martin was 59 years old. Jerry Lewis was 50. 20 years had passed, an entire generation, and neither man had forgotten the other. Dean would see Jerry's face on television during the telethon every Labor Day, would watch for a few minutes when Jeannie wasn't looking, would feel something twist in his chest. Jerry would hear Dean's songs on the radio, would change the station immediately, would spend the rest of the day wondering what Dean was doing, if Dean ever thought about him. But neither picked up the phone, until Frank Sinatra decided he'd had enough. The setup. August 1976, Frank Sinatra's house, Palm Springs. Dean was visiting. They were sitting by the pool, drinking scotch, talking about nothing important, the way old friends do. "You know, Jerry's doing the telethon next weekend," Frank said casually. Dean's face hardened. "Good for him." 20 years, Dean. 20 years you two haven't spoken." "Yeah, so what?" Frank leaned forward. "So it's horse shit, that's what." "Frank, no, listen to me. I've watched you both suffer for 20 years. I've watched you turn into ghosts of what you were, and I'm telling you right now, this ends." Dean stood up. "You don't know what you're talking about. Sit down." Something in Frank's voice made Dean sit. "I'm going to be on Jerry's telethon next weekend, guest appearance, and you're coming with me." "The hell I am." "Yes, you are, because I'm not asking, I'm telling, and you're going to walk out on that stage, and you're going to hug that man, and you're going to remember what it felt like before the money and the fame and the bullshit got in the way." Dean's hands were shaking. "He won't want to see me." "Yes, he will." "How do you know?" Frank smiled, that dangerous Sinatra smile, "because he's your brother, Dean, and brothers always come home." The night everything changed. September 5th, 1976, 11:52 p.m. Frank Sinatra walked onto the stage of the Las Vegas Hilton. Jerry Lewis was in the middle of introducing the next act, saw Frank, smiled that big Jerry smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, the chairman of the board himself, Frank Sinatra." The crowd erupted. Frank hugged Jerry, whispered something in his ear that the microphones didn't catch. "You know, Jer," Frank said, turning to the audience,
I have a friend who loves what you do every year." Jerry nodded. "Well, that's nice, Frank. That's real nice." "In fact," Frank continued, "he wanted to come down and tell you himself." Jerry's face started to fade, something in Frank's voice, something in his eyes. "Frank, what are you—" Dean Martin walked out from the wings. The crowd saw him first. The roar was deafening. Jerry turned, saw Dean, and for a moment, for just one single moment, Jerry Lewis couldn't speak. 20 years of silence, 20 years of anger and hurt and regret. All of it disappeared the second their eyes met. Dean walked toward Jerry. His hands were shaking. His eyes were wet. Jerry's mouth was opening and closing, no sound coming out, just tears. They met center stage, and Dean Martin, the coolest man in show business, the man who never showed emotion, the man who spent 20 years pretending he didn't care, Dean Martin broke. He grabbed Jerry, held him, and cried on national television in front of 5 million people. Jerry cried too, sobbed into Dean's shoulder like a child. "I missed you. God, I missed you, kid," he whispered. "I missed you too," Jerry managed, "every goddamn day."
They pulled apart, looked at each other. 20 years older. 20 years of life lived separately. But the love was still there. Everything else had been bullshit. Jerry, trying to recover, wiped his eyes, looked at the audience. "So, Dean, you working?" The callback to their first meeting, the question Jerry had asked in 1945 when they were just 2 kids trying to make it. Dean laughed through his tears. "Yeah, I'm working. You?" "Every day, Pally, every day." They hugged again. The audience gave them a standing ovation that lasted 3 full minutes. Frank Sinatra stood off to the side, watching, smiling. He had just given his best friends the greatest gift of their lives, each other. The aftermath. After that night, Dean and Jerry spoke on the phone regularly. Not every day, not even every week, but regularly. The conversation was different now, older, wiser, no longer about who got top billing or whose name came first. Just 2 old friends talking about golf and grandkids and the way their backs hurt. "You know what the stupidest thing we ever did was?" Jerry said during one call in 1985. "What's that?" "Not talking for 20 years. The ignorance of that. I hope I always forget how dumb we were." Dean was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, me too, kid. Me too." In 1987, Dean's son, Dean Paul, was killed in a plane crash. Jerry Lewis showed up to the funeral unannounced, sat in the back, didn't want attention, just wanted to be there. When Dean saw him afterward, Dean's eyes filled with tears. "You came." "Of course I came. That's what brothers do." They hugged, long and tight, 2 old men holding each other up. When Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, 1995, Jerry Lewis went to the funeral. He stood at the casket, looked at his best friend's face. "I lost my partner," Jerry would say later, "and my best friend, the man who made me the man I am today." In Jerry's 2005 memoir, Dean and Me, A Love Story, he wrote about that night in 1976, about seeing Dean walk out on stage, about feeling 20 years of walls crumble in an instant. "When I left that stage," Jerry wrote, "I understood how an amputee must feel, like a part of me that had been missing for so long was suddenly back where it belonged." The lesson. This is the real story of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. Not the fame, not the movies, not the millions of dollars. The real story is about 2 men who let pride,
destroy the most important relationship in their lives, and about a third man, Frank Sinatra, who loved them both enough to force them to face their pain. 20 years is a long time to be angry. 20 years is a long time to hold a grudge. 20 years is a long time to miss someone and be too proud to pick up the phone. Dean and Jerry wasted 20 years, but they had 10 years after the reunion, 10 years of phone calls and visits and remembering why they loved each other in the first place. 10 years is better than nothing, but imagine if they'd had 30 years, 40 years, a lifetime. That's the lesson. Not that reconciliation is possible, that reconciliation is necessary. Because the people you love don't live forever, and the time you waste being stubborn is time you never get back. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis learned that lesson on September 5, 1976. Don't make them wait 20 years to learn it. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Next week, we're revealing what Frank Sinatra said to Dean in that dressing room before the reunion, the words that convinced Dean to walk out on that stage. Drop a comment. Is there someone you need to reconcile with? Someone you've been too proud to call? What's stopping you? Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone carrying a grudge, someone wasting years on anger. Because that's what this channel is about. Real stories about real people who made real mistakes and found real redemption. The truth that might save you from wasting the time you have left. I'll see you in the next one.